Hi, my name is Sean Olson. This could be another video demonstrating how to use 3ds Max for the Source game engine, and this time we're going to focus on Garry's Mod. It actually applies to all the mods, but we're going to focus on Garry's Mod because there have been a lot of requests about updating some of the videos using Garry's Mod. Now, in the last few months, Valve has done a big update to everything, the Source engine, and you all know it as SteamPipe, and there have been changes. And also Wallworm has been changed to make it easier to set up. I'm going to walk you through setting up Wallworm for Garry's Mod. First, you want to browse to where you have Garry's Mod installed and the bin folder, which will be a path like this. Inside it, you'll find a file called gameconfig.txt. We want to open that, and we want to rename some of these. I'm just putting a GM in the front of the names of these games. The reason I'm doing this is because I already have configuration in Wallworm for these other mods, and I don't want to be confused as to which is which later. So that's all I did, was rename those names. Next thing we need to do is open up Wallworm itself and go to the settings. What we want to do is import some game settings, and we're going to browse for that file in that folder that we just had. And I'm going to just copy that path, paste it in here, hit open, and look for my game info, double click it, and now we have some new entries in here: GM Team Fortress, GM Day of Defeat Source, and GM Counter-Strike Source, GM for Garry's Mod. I'm going to switch us to Counter-Strike Source Garry's Mod. So we need to set a couple paths for Garry's Mod, and we have to copy a file. So the first thing we need to do is open up our Counter-Strike Source in C-Strike folder and look for a file called gameinfo.txt. We need to copy that to your C-Strike folder in Garry's Mod. And likewise, if you're using TF or DoD, it's the same thing. So I'm going to copy this over here, and that's good. Then we need to go and change these bin and Garry's Mod folder. For the game info, we need to change that to C-Strike. And again, if you're using TF or DoD, you'd use those. And for the bin folder here, we want to actually use the location we have for Counter-Strike Source. So I'm going to go to Counter-Strike Source here and look for its bin folder where all of my compilers are at. I'm going to copy that path and paste it in here. And that will make us be able to compile our things for this mod into Garry's Mod. I'm going to save this for later so I can always get back to it and get these settings. Now we're going to build a simple scene. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here, and I'm going to turn on the display of grids with the G button, and I'm going to change the grid size by right-clicking my snaps toggle up here, go to home grid, and I want this to be at a number like 64. So every 64 units there's now a grid. I want to turn the snaps on, and I want to snap to grid. I'm going to turn off this vertex snap momentarily. And now I'm just going to build a little simple level. We'll do something slightly complex so you can see a little bit how you might make things in Max. We're going to snap to the grid and turn these lines on here, and I'm going to make some of these. I'm just making the outline to a non-rectangular room. And remember to keep these snap to grid on. Oh, can't do that. That would be unconvex. Be concave. So you have to make sure that these shapes that we're making right here are going to stay convex. So when you're making world geometry, which is the layout part of your map in Source, you always want to remember that everything has to remain convex. And we made a failure here because I made a looped line. I'm just going to delete it and start over. It's faster. So when you're making these lines, you need to make sure that you don't click and drag. You just click and move. And we're going to finish this off. Like that. In reality, this outer one isn't necessary because it's sealed off right there. So this is going to be the outer wall, and then I'm going to make one more that's aligned to all of these points, and this is going to be my floor and my ceiling. So now you get to learn your first lesson. We're going to use a modifier. We're going to extrude this spline that's been sealed, and we're going to extrude it down by the amount of -16. So then I want to select all of the lines that I just made. And to make sure I'm just selecting lines, I'm going to choose shapes, and I'm going to deselect my internal one there. And I'm going to add to these a modifier, again, extrude. We're going to extrude these by a total of 256. There we go. So now we have a floor that's not rectangular. I wanted to do that because, you know, everything's always rectangular. And we have walls. The next thing we want to do is copy our floor and move it up to the top here. I can right click and hit move. I can click the move icon up here, or the shortcut is usually W to move something. Now if I wanted to snap exactly to the top of this, I have some nifty tools here. I'm going to turn off snap to grid, then turn on snap to vertex toggle. So now it's only going to snap to the vertex of my shape. And if I want the bottom of this to right here, this vertex, to snap to this vertex up here, all I have to do is shift drag that up to that point, hit OK, copy, and now there's that. I'm showing you this because a lot of people that are used to Hammer and coming into Max have a hard time understanding how you move things around. It's really simple once you learn how to use the various forms of snaps, and you can use the transform type-ins, etc., etc. There's way more ways to do things in Max and Hammer. Just got to get used to them all. Now let's put a material on these things, the walls. First of all, let's select all of these walls, and we're going to add these to a layer. I'm going to open up my layer manager, and I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to add a brand new layer. I'm going to call it walls. And then I'm going to actually pick the floor and the ceiling, and I'm going to add those to the layout. And I'm going to hide the layout currently. And now we're going to just select all of those walls, and we're going to apply a material. You can open up the material editor, and we can create a new material, but I'm going to use some materials from CS already. I'm not going to make my own right now. And we'll use this just brick wall. I'm going to put this out here. I'm going to assign that to the selection. Now notice I don't really see anything out here. And one of the reasons this happened is because these objects that I made don't have any mapping coordinates. We can go over here and generate mapping coordinates, and that will do us for now. You have a lot of control in Max over controlling these maps, and I'm just not going to get into that right now. But I wanted to show you that if you have an object that has an option that says generate mapping coordinates, you click that and it will put the mapping coordinates and allow the textures to appear. If that doesn't work, you have other tools like UVW map modifiers. So now I'm going to go back to my layer manager, and I made a boo-boo by not naming my objects. Line 9 no, I believe, is the floor. I'm going to unhide these, hide line 10. So I know which one is which later. I'm going to select my floor and give it a name. Floor. Likewise, I'm going to select line the ceiling here, and I'm going to put ceiling. It makes it easier later when you look at the objects in the list to find out what is what. So again, I'm going to hide the ceiling because I want to put a texture in the floor and see what it looks like here. We're going to find another texture from CS. We'll just use the cellar floor. I can drag it out here onto the object, but I'm going to put it out here in the material editor so I can see the stuff. And I'm going to assign that to the floor. And again, we can't see the texture in the viewport. It's just brown. And that is because this floor object does not have mapping coordinates. And there we go. I added the mapping coordinates. Now if I really want to change these, I'm not going to do the walls, but I'm going to do the floor so you can see how we can control the scaling of them simply. I'm going to select this object and I'm going to add a new modifier. This time I'm going to use UVW map. And I'm going to choose box for this one. And the size of this, I'm going to choose, I'm going to shrink it down. And you see this gizmo here, this orange gizmo. This demonstrates the bounding of the mapping and how it will repeat in the view. If I go over here to the modify, I can choose that gizmo and actually move around the textures in the view. I'm going to hit G to hide the grid, so make it easier to see this. So you see here, moving this gizmo around lets me control the texture. In fact, I can actually scale this. I can change it this way instead of typing it in, or rotate it. We'll leave it like that. So now let's unhide the ceiling because I want to apply material to this, and I want to put the sky texture from source that will make it give off light. So we're going to just bring this out into our view. I'm going to drag and put that on there. And again, this one is not appearing in the scene because for this object it does not have generate mapping coordinates. I can turn those on if I want, and we can see the skybox there. I'm not going to worry about its UVW. And I'm going to go ahead and hide this again. So now we'll make a couple models to put in our scene. And of course one of them will have to be Wallworm itself. So we're going to go back to our favorite extrude tool here. We're going to extrude this up like this. And we'll rotate this one by 90 degrees. And now this will be a model. Everybody loves teapots. We're going to make a teapot model. And we're going to do some special stuff with this teapot here in a minute. Let's go ahead and make a little arch here real quickly. Do something like this. We're going to hit F4 to show edge faces here. And we're going to want to add some segments along here and a bunch of segments along here. And we're going to go use another modifier. We're going to use the bend here. And we're going to do 180. And there's our arch. I'm just going to convert it to a poly. And we're then going to click that side. Click this side with both edges selected. We're going to chamfer these a little bit to make it a little bit smoother. That. We'll unisolate this. We have a teapot, a wallworm, and an arch here. We're going to, I'm not even going to give these guys their materials. I'm not going to make them. I'll let Wallworm make them for me. So I'm going to select these, and I'm going to choose Wallworm. I'm going to go to level design here actually and open up Anvil, because I want to turn all of these into a prop real fast. So I'm going to say that all of these are static props that are opaque, and we're going to choose that these are all brick, and that's good. I'm going to hit quick WWMT. So now it made 3 helpers in the scene, and these guys turned orange because Wallworm created a material for them. Now for this model, we actually are going to put a whole bunch of these around here. I'm going to show you something here. So we're going to make basically a big path of these going around the room. And we already have this as a model, so what we now want to do is make a proxy. And the way we make a proxy is we select the actual helper for this model. Then we click this button that says Create Proxies from WWMT. And here we go. We've got this object. Oops. And now what I'm going to do is create a path around here that is going to clone this along. And we want to clone the proxy, not the model, because the proxy has special attributes that will be reused later. So now what we need to do is create a line. It goes something like this. We'll make this go around like this, and we'll just stop right there. Now we want to select, we want to unhide a certain tool, and this is in the extras. And by default, you'll see this little array icon. If we press that down and hold it down, you'll see these other options. We want the spacing tool. So what I'm wanting to do here is space these along here. Actually, I want to count, not a spacing. And I've already see a problem. They're not oriented correctly. And it has to do with the direction of the way the pivot point of the object is. So I'm actually going to start over with this. I'm going to hit cancel. I'm actually going to delete my proxy, but I know that it points to the X on here is where it goes. So I'm going to delete my proxy because I need to remake it. Select my object, my original model. I need to change its pivot point. So I'm going to go to Effect Pivot Point Only, new Center to Object, and then I want it to be located pretty much at 0, and I'm going to rotate it. Just going to type in, make sure it's exactly minus 90 degrees. So that way I know that when it follows the path, it's going to follow it this way, right along that. Undo that, bring back my anvil, select the Wallworm Model Tool helper, create a proxy that is now there, and I'm going to move this guy out of my way for the moment, and we're going to go back to our spacing tool. I'm going to click the spacing tool. I'm going to choose Pick Path, click that, and then choose the number. Pick path. There we go. And to actually get it to rotate, I just need to rotate this 90 degrees. And I'm not sure why that's not showing that now, but something in my viewport is causing it to hide. Unless I change something. But I want a bunch of these proxies all through here. Let's change the number to something like this. And just hit apply. Close. I'm going to close this floater. I want to rotate this guy a little bit. Like that. Okay. And I don't want this model to be stuck there like that. So I'm going to move it over here. And now we'll put him out here and rotate him. So he's out here like that. This teapot's going to be special. We're going to make a prop fizz real fast out of him. So what we want to do is isolate him, and excuse me, we also want the helper here. And we're going to say that when this guy gets blown up, it turns into some other stuff, and we're going to turn it into all the pieces of itself. Okay, so what I want to do is clone this as a copy, and I want to convert that teapot that copied into an editable poly, and I want to detach each piece as an object. Detach, detach, and okay, that's fine. I'm going to open up Wallworm Model Tools. I'm going to select my model here, and I'm actually going to hide him, and I've only got the pieces here, the chunks. The reason I did this is because these pieces actually still have reference to this model. If I right click, go to properties, I'll see this here. And because it's tied, the way I need to untie that is I go into these object properties and delete those. I should have done this at the object level, but there's only a couple of them, so I'm not going to redo it. And I'm going to delete this. So I should have done that before right after I copied that teapot and then broke it up. So now I have these 4 pieces, and to designate them being different when it breaks up, they're not only pieces, but I'm going to give it a different color. We're going to open up the material editor here, and we're going to make a new material for these, and we're going to call it Broken Teapot Blues. That's the name of our material. It's going to have a bluish color, and we're going to assign that to this whole teapot. So now I want to go down to the custom Gibbs section down here, and I want to choose custom Gibbs. I want to change some of these settings here. We want this to be glass, some kind of glass, and we want it to be pushed away by the player, and we want it, we'll just keep it at that. And we're going to do add selected Gibbs, and notice it created a bunch of helpers here. It changed the Gibbs count to 4, and I want to hide those guys, and I want to unhide our model up here, and I want to just let Wallworm make its collision hull, and we're going to do quick hull, and now we have a collision hull and it's concave. There we go. We're going to compile this guy in a minute. Now we're going to export our Gibbs, and this is done separately inside of Wallworm than the main model because you may want to be editing your Gibbs independently, and I don't want to make it so that you have to compile all of your Gibbs every time you export your model. So now that we've got our Gibbs compiled, we're going to export our model, and now this model is exported. We're going to export our textures, which I only have VMTs for all these. That's fine. Materials are exported. Okay. What we need to do now is export the Wallworm model and this model. So I'm actually just going to select these 2 Wallworm model tool helpers, and I'm going to choose exporters, export WWMT to source models. So we have 2 models exported. Great. And now while we have those 2 WWMT helpers selected, I'm actually going to export their textures, selected model textures. And that didn't give us any confirmation because it usually doesn't if there aren't textures or bitmaps to compile, but you can see it made all the VMTs that I needed. At this point, we can add a couple spawns if we want. we can do that under Level Design, Point Entities. And if you see something like this, it just means you have to go to your settings and tell this mod that we're using a certain FGD, and there we should go. If you happen to continue getting that, you can always go to your Wallworm settings and hit this reparse FGD, or choose when you change between FGDs, it will reparse them and make your entity cache. But once you have that, then you can go to your entity tools, and we'll just add a spawn point here too. Info player terrorist. I'm going to turn on snap to face here. And we've got a terrorist, a couple terrorist spawns, and now we need a couple counter terrorists. There we go. To control the direction that they're facing, you'll want to change the to local, and then if you rotate the direction of Y is going to be the direction that this entity faces. We want him to face the teapot though. Okay. We need to add a light. You can add a light entity with the point entities in Wallworm, but I prefer to use the standard lights. Wallworm will turn many lights, max lights, into source lights. So we want a directional. So we want we'll do a free direct here. And we'll move this guy up a little bit. We'll rotate him like this, and this will turn into a light environment. And to make it so that this whole scene shows correctly, we're going to turn on overshoot, and we can do cast shadows if we want for rendering purposes. There we go. Here's our light. Changing the color of here, and the multiplier will be the color and brightness of your light. Unlike Hammer, which always knows that everything you're creating inside of it is convex world geometry, Wallworm is not like that, because you can create anything, models, and your convex geometry all at once. Because of that, you have to tell Wallworm what is your world geometry. In this case, it's the outlying details. I can select my walls really fast. I'm going to right click this layer, hit select. So I need to tell Wallworm that these are world geometry. One way you can do that is opening up Level Design and hit set selection as brush geometry. That's important. I also need to do that to the ceiling and floor. So I'm going to select those, and the same thing. If I don't do that, the compiler will crash. So we're almost ready to export here, and I'm just going to do a couple more things. By default, Wallworm will export one version of every model that's tied to a Wallworm model tool helper in a scene when you're exporting a VMF. In this circumstance, I don't want the custom Gibbs objects to export. So any of these that have Gibbs in them, I want to not export with the VMF. So I'm going to select these. So I have 4 objects selected here, and I'm going to go to Level Design and exclude export of model. So those 4 Gibbs will not export into the scene when we export here. Now we can export our scene. I'm going to go ahead and just do the export here. I want to point out when it's done compiling at the end, you'll see it's packing all of these assets into it, your models and textures and materials. That happens if you check these options for pack in the exporter. In order for this map to appear in Gary's mod, for some reason, even though you can have these subfolders, we need to copy our BSP. So I'm going to just drag the BSP from the maps folder, C-Strike maps folder, to the Gary's mod maps folder. And now we should be able to start our game. Alright, so now we're going to load up our level that we've made. Do start new game and browse for the level. We called it Gmod 2013. Start game. And here we are. Here's our level. Notice all of our proxies got turned into instances of that prop. This model is there. Now, none of these arches nor this wall worm have any collision because I didn't create a collision hall in wall worm, and I can walk straight through them because of that. However, had we made a collision hall, you would not be able to walk through those. Now, this is a physics prop. That means that in Gmod we can pull it up here and drop it. It's dropping really slowly because of the settings we gave it. We could have given it more mass, but we didn't. And because we made custom gibs, and those are blue, when we break this model, it will turn into all the pieces. So we'll throw it over here, and we're going to bust it into the pieces. And you see what happens. Those gibs have blue because we gave the gibs model a blue material. And here's all the pieces of this model. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was entertaining, educational, and informative, and you learned something through it. Please feel free to share feedback on YouTube or the Wallworm forums. Also at Facebook and Google+, we have some Wallworm communities that you can join. The Wallworm forums, which are at wallworm.net, also have some premium sections now where you can get premium content, tips, hints, and ability to vote on new features in Wallworm. My name is Sean Olson. You can learn more about me at seanolson.net, and you can always get the latest version of Wallworm at wallworm.com. Thank you, and have a good day.